going on, guys? Tacos El Chevo. Hey, we got steak, chicken, chorizo, beans, pastor right over there. Come on down.
If you go to the next side.
Show these lights off.
Yeah, buddy. So we can change 2 different colors of red. We got white control. Next level. Close. Future of horticulture, science, and engineering, buddy.
Get comfortable. Let's get this panel started. So welcome everybody. This is a very special edition of Clone Questions Live. Who out there has seen the lives I've been doing for the past year and change? A couple here and there, you see, yeah. So this is an impromptu version. Thank you back there, appreciate it. This is a special edition of Clone Questions Live here. So we got panelists joining us. We got an amazing crowd. Thank you everybody for coming out to support this first ever Expo here, and hopefully first of many. We're here to shape what the future ones are going to be, and everybody here has a part in that. So shout out to you guys, first of all.
Hey, how about a shout out for Paul for putting this together, guys? Round of applause for Paul. I know what you're looking to do. This is a fantastic turn, brother. Thank you for having us.
Appreciate the support. So just like a normal form of Clone Questions Live, I want to know where people are coming from. I've heard some pretty far distances tonight, so if you could shout out where you guys came in from. Any locals, any people? Diego. That's LA. AZ. Where was AZ? Who came the furthest? Who traveled the furthest?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Think about that, guys. Think about that. St. Louis. That's such an amazing feat. I mean, that's such a way to travel just to come and help shape this. So shout out to you guys. Come see me afterwards. I'm gonna get you guys something good, all right? Come see me afterwards. And as you know, 9 p.m. there'll be a big giveaway tonight too, so stick around till then. For now, let's introduce our panelists. To my right, we got Sonny from Drip Hydro. We got Santo from Quest, Chad, Maven, and Kush Alley. So it's, in tandem, right, in tandem. And Sergio from the 3 brands, the Connect, Cultivated Genetics, and the Custodian, right? The panelists for tonight. Thank you for having us, Paul. So, who here works in a grow? Who here makes clones? All right. Who here makes clones at scale? Hundreds, thousands, 10, 5, quite a bit of people. If any of you guys got questions, it's not too late. Submit your question on the flashcard right over here, and we'll get those questions answered towards the end here, all right? Just want to gauge the crowd and what we're looking at here, and what kind of questions, what things we could touch on. But let's kick it off with IPA. See a couple heads shaking in here. So Sonny, if we could, help. What are some of the things you've seen when it comes to nursery clones? And, to summarize it as like what they could walk away with. Because honestly, just what the goal would be is you walk away with these golden nuggets. You got to walk away with value. So let's talk a little bit about nutrients and silica in the propagation space.
Yeah, again, at the end of the day, Sunny or Sunshine on Instagram. I work for Drip Hydro, Power SI. I'm a lead cultivator over at the Finest Farms. We do stuff with Backpack Boys. I run IPM management over there at 2 of our facilities. Both of them are 400 lights. Again, so I've kind of been an IPM consultant for a lot of guys underneath the scene in LA, Orange County, and Inland Empire. Nurseries and a lot of other places, usually what I see is, you know, a genetic or something will get really, really, really popular, right? And then a lot of people are trying to bring cuts in from different gardens, and usually when you get different gardens cuts, you get their problems as well. So when it comes to like certain pests, like let's say for example, you know, thrips, potato rice root aphids, you know, spider mites, powdery mildew, you get hop latent viroid, a bunch of things. Like I got hop latent viroid before Dark Heart Nursery put it out and said a bunch of things. I was running cuts from them a long time ago at a facility, and let's just say they called it Fusarium and the Dunning virus before they called it hop latent viroid. And I mean, you just saw it everywhere. And you know, I started reading on forums, other things, started talking to my other people who have learned a lot of IPM, you know, specialization in, you know, and like 10% bleach was a big like solution for me with hop latent viroid and getting a plant restarted. You were able to cut like the cleanest top from there, soak it in that 10% bleach solution, try to restart a bunch of moms, and we would actually have genetics like come completely back and not get the viroid, start doing like sterile cleaning with our tools, other things like that. The biggest thing I could tell anyone, pop seeds, and if you're gonna get genetics from your friends, quarantine everything for a minimum 3 to 4 weeks. Because I know how it's like in commercial cultivation. You get the next cut, you want to put it in your mom room, you want to get it implemented, you want to start getting cuts of it, you want to start ripping through, and you start to get a lot of issues. You know, I switched over a facility not that long ago, a nursery, Universal Nursery, shout out to my boy Gav. You know, he was struggling with some issues, like not like specifically gnarly pest ones, but he would get some that pop up every now and then. And I started putting him on like my SOPs, you know, rotations of at least, you know, 2 beneficial and 3, you know, broad spectrum or different types of IPMs, and just mixing up your sprays. Because it's not just one IPM that's gonna get rid of everything. By the way, just as a heads up, any company who tells you that, don't listen to them. You have to switch up rotation. It depends on what type of pest you're dealing with. Because certain different sprays are going to have different effects on your plants too. You can't hit stuff like back to back in certain, you know, applications. And then, you know, just certain root drenches, when you do certain things, there's a lot of products that, again, are not safe and regulated in the state of California and Michigan, who have really, really strict regulations. You guys got to be on top of that. And then, like, I see as the future as it moves in and we start getting more and more regulated, like, your guys' whole IPM crew needs to be certified, needs to log their EPA numbers, needs to be, you know, entering their REI times when they're coming in and out of their rooms, what they sprayed, what they didn't spray, you know, because I just see the industry moving so much further in. And then not only too, like, there's a lot of times where people are like, okay, well, I threw all these IPMs at it, I did this, I did that, and it's like, well, what are you applicating it with? Because if you're using like a 2-gallon backpack sprayer, homie, yeah, that's not gonna work. You know, you have to, if you're running commercial cultivation, you have to be running, you know, like a Dram Hydra 50-gallon sprayer and going through your rooms, coating them, or getting like, you know, a big mister in greenhouses. I've seen some crazy ways people do IPM applications.
I would love to back it up to the basics of intake quarantine periods. You mentioned 3 to 4 weeks, right? What about the solutions? What, obviously we're bringing stuff in and we don't know what we're dealing with at that point. Bring us back to what are some basics for quarantine periods?
So again, like quarantine periods for me are being able to have like a secluded room where, again, you're only having like that one person maybe towards like the middle or end of the day, because obviously cultivation crews, you know, sometimes people are running on skeleton crews, and it's like you're not going to really go assist that room or be walking into where you possibly may have a problem and then tracking it into your other facility or doing something like that. So the biggest thing with me was when you quarantine, I'm talking like, no, it's not quarantine in a corner next to 2 benches of where your other things are. It's complete own separate room, you know, separated from everybody. Not everybody's going into that room tracking in other things, especially if you don't have foot baths other things around your outside, you know?
What about some dunks? What's like a good intake dunk that you can use?
So like as far as me, when I like cut clones and I do everything, xylitol has always been like my best friend.
What rate?
I believe it or not, I go ham, dude. Some people are like, what, are you crazy? And I'm like, no, dude, it's just, I like to keep my plants clean. I'll go 15 to 30 mLs per gallon and just soak it in there 45 seconds. Some people go really light, I go really heavy, especially like with, if you're dealing with thrips or spider mites or other problems and pests like that, you need to soak heavy. You cannot just be like, 15 mLs as a preventative and this is gonna work.
How about our terpene enhancer of micronized sulfur?
So like with me, okay, so again, you cannot say that you foliar your plants with micronized sulfur. It's like a big thing. You know, I don't really like to speak on that because it's not something you can keep in your IPM cabinet, by the way. You have to go put it on your nutrient rack and say you're using it as an inoculant. You can never say that you're spraying your plants with that, just as a heads up for all my people who do IPMs. And again, if I foliar spray it or I do the application, it's usually like a tablespoon in a per gallon in a root drench, or then it's 2 to 4 tablespoons, depending on how gnarly your problems are, dude. I've walked into webbed, spider-mited plants, like I'm talking, they look like highway roller coaster trails with leopard print powdery mildew was like my introduction to the game 11 years ago, and I sat there and my jaw hit the floor, and I was like, okay, like this is horrible, like, and it was, a basic. Yeah, people are busting out the shop vac trying to save whatever they could, but like again, that was during like week 6 of flower, and believe it or not, I got the webs to at least come off the tops through. That's when I just went and dove head deep into the game and tried to learn everything that I could. I wanted to be like the janitor part of the job, not the cleanest part, but I always knew it was a guarantee for me, whether I'm consulting or working for another company or helping somebody else, it's a problems fixing solution kind of guy. I am the guy who I look at a problem, there's only solutions. You feel me?
Right, so the prevention part, right? So we're bringing the plants into a completely segregated area, right? And now what are you doing? You're doing a couple dunks, and then we can do some pathogen screening in that same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Like same thing too, like if you're not bringing in and doing hop latent viroid tests, which we now have, again, I'm referencing what I was going through, let's say 8 years ago when that was really popping off. I'm talking about now we've come so far into the game, you can test these technologies. I mean, they have a machine that you can tissue culture in the back right over there and restart a plant and do other things too. Like at the end of the day, man, the game has moved so much forward that I feel there's a lot of different other solutions to that. But as far as a lot of people still doing commercial cultivation, like the future is still scary for most places that I'm even in. A lot of guys are still doing old school things or have old school ways about doing it. It's just I'm trying to lay down like maybe the basics first, and you can get into hop latent viroid testing, genetic testing, all of these other things as soon as you know, okay, I don't have bugs or I don't have these issues or other things. And predatory mites, like let's say you want to be organic, use rose beetles, use spickles, use Swirsky's, use Californicuses, like use whatever like spectrum of IPM you want to go at your problems with. You feel me?
You just touched on something very important. That's the professional maturity of cultivators, right? People don't want to just put the blame on someone else. You want to look internally first. What are the things that we're doing to prevent any sort of potential pest or pathogen issue?
I think it starts with testing. Who agrees with that? I mean, nowadays, testing is where you start. Not, I look, I think, I guess. Before we used to rely on cultivation skills and, the head grower to be like, yeah, that's the one. Oh, we're good. We don't got to worry about nothing. You got to verify it. You got to verify it. Right nowadays, the way, and especially nowadays, I mean, testing has become so available, so cost effective, where there is no excuse. And especially if you're doing clones, that test is your insurance for the rest of your crop. So I really think there's no substitute to testing, because then it's black and white. It's not anybody's opinion. You know what you got. And if you're not quite sure, test from somewhere else, and then you can really see. And if you get something one positive, one negative, boom, test it somewhere else. I see where it breaks off from there.
So for example, like don't just trust those hop latent viroid tests you can buy on Amazon either, brother. They're dead serious. There's people who will put out whatever that you can. Like go to a trusted, certified lab. Do not go through some random, little at-home test you think you could do, because I'm still gonna tell you that thing's still gonna pop up around your facility and you're still going to have major issues. Like I'm saying again, my years of cultivation and what I'm into now and so far is how the game has come. Like again, this hop latent viroid testing and all these things are now so big before you bring in new genetics, and not only just quarantining and doing things, but I've seen a lot of people in the rush of the game. They need the new next hot Skittles cross or the new next hot Grunts or Jealousy cross or this or whatever else is moving in the market right now, and they just put it straight to their facility. You think that they're, the next person is like running or thinking about it, of course, and that's why we're all sitting on this panel, right? Because you want to drop these gems to people who are just rushing and trying to find the next thing or do the next thing to up their next level of cultivation, especially on a commercial scale.
I wanted to touch on what Sonny was talking about, cultural practices, and that's something that we have our IPM manager, Danny Nugent, right here for Kush Alley. And it starts with that inspection of that clone. Every clone's treated like it has hop latent. I mean, I personally think it's more widespread than people think. Even coming from tissue culture, I've seen them flagged before. So a lot of times when we bring stuff in, if it looks dirty, it won't even come in. And I don't care how good the genetic is, what the person's saying, we'll just offer it. But if we don't see anything, yes, isolation. Isolation with negative pressure so nothing gets out, HEPA filter, charcoal filter, whatever it is. And a lot of times we actually will clone off that clone because that root zone might hide some stuff and things can overwinter, things can actually pop up later on. So we have a special genetic, we will do that. A lot of times it comes down to when we look at these clones and we do a generational approach when we make clones. So, like I said, I do see a lot of times hop latent is more widespread than anybody thinks. And we have stuff that has tested before. And I look at this as more of a virus load, right? Like viral load, if you have a high viral load, you're going to see this thing flat. If you have a low one, you might see a couple flats here and there. And that's not to say that genetic's totally lost. We borrow a lot from mitigation processes where we clone the fastest part of the clone. We won't touch the plant at all, right? We'll take those top clones, and that's our next generation of clones. Because we find that those clones are the fastest growing and might have the least viral load in there. But it really comes down to these cultural practices that we bring in. Regardless of what you guys are spraying on there, you want to make sure you're staying clean. Like when you're making clones that are rotating scissors in a bleach solution, I do use xylitol too, but I find bleach is better. And these are not new techniques. These are techniques that tissue culture actually uses. So you watch micropropagation, it's all with bleach. You'll see this really, it's been around for a long time in the floral industry and the strawberry industry.
Bleach works.
Yeah.
It's cheap. It's available everywhere. The only downside is that it degrades fast, right? So you can't store your bleach for 2 days and go back and dip your scissors back into it. No, that thing's been gassing off. And if you really want to be sure of your chlorine ppm levels, you could go to Amazon for that and grab some test strips. Test your levels, and you will see where you started at and see where you are and see when it's time to change out that batch of bleach, 10% bleach.
Couldn't agree more, man. And that's really where you should be looking at how frequently you change out your shears. Every time we change our mom, we change our shears. We actually have dedicated shears for every single mom in our room. So we make no chance with mechanical transmission or cross-contamination for that matter. So that's just one of those costly goods. A pair of shears is a cost that you should be replacing very frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's before we get into the breeding, before we get into seeds and everything else, I want to touch on environmentals, because you can do all these sprays and do what you're supposed to be doing, but if your environment is off, if your equipment is not right, you're fighting against a really big, hill right there. So if we could pass it over to Santo, I want to touch a little bit on keeping a nursery environment steady and how to properly have that environment, how to best utilize some equipment in that.
Yeah, so from an environmental standpoint, when you're touching a nursery, whether it's you're fully integrated with mother plants, juvenile plants, your clones, you definitely want your environment balanced. Dehumidification and humidification obviously is the way to maintain strong, healthy plants. What I see a lot experience-wise is sometimes improper setup of HVAC systems, lack of airflow, lack of dehumidification, some of these setups. A lot of times your HVAC system obviously is going to run long stretches in a nursery, in a monostock room, right? We're talking about 18 hours. And the issues I see in some of these rooms is the setup of the HVAC systems. We have, you've got cold direct air blowing onto plants with very little airflow. You're going to ignite PM, right? You're going to see certain corners of the room ignite with PM, and really on the dehumidification front and airflow front, right? You want to prevent that, and it might seem counterintuitive. Oh, airflow, you're going to blow mold spore around, yada yada yada, but the reality is you do want that air to mix. You do not want your HVAC system to be blowing directly into plants and dropping that dew point in your plants, and experiencing this drop dew point where molds and other pathogens can take over, whether it's a leaf, whether it's a flower, whatever the case may be. And having a properly staged, properly sized, properly staged humidification system in your nursery is one piece of an IPM protocol. Just maintaining those deltas between day conditions and night conditions, keep them tight. A lot of times you're not running your nursery like you're running a flower room with these large deltas. You want to keep kind of very tight set points and baselines, and again, diffs at night. You don't typically dive too deep. And a lot of those, in flower, we can attribute that to, a lot of this to be positive stressors. But, for healthy juvenile plants, for healthy mother plants, right, there's a lot of consistency there. The other piece that I think a lot of people don't talk about on the IPM circle is your HVAC systems or your dehumidifiers, especially our dehumidifiers, come with MERV-rated filters. MERV 13 filters are going to capture mold spore, right? It's not going to capture everything. It's not a HEPA filter. It's definitely going to capture mold spore, though, and that's going to be one tool in your toolbox that that you could have that is going to help defeat what's ever going on, whatever pathogens that's going on in your garden. And again, airflow, right? There's another piece of this puzzle. If you've properly sized for airflow within your gardens, the dehumidification solution, right? If you're sized right, you're sized properly, you've broken it up in incrementally, you've got additional airflow in your garden to help mitigate some of these things.
I think airflow is huge. I mean, for the longest time, I've always preached for the airflow to be, like, ignore the dehu and the AC for a second. The fans in that room should be moving all of that air in that room. I never like to rely on my AC unit to move my air in my room. Because, I want my AC unit to condition the air that's already moving around my room. Because if you do, like you mentioned, if you do have the ACs turning on and blasting cold air on your leaf surface, you're like, oh, I'm still at 80 degrees, 79 degrees. But your leaf surface temperature is 10 degrees lower than that. And then, if you're looking at the VPD chart, it's based on the leaf surface temperature as well. That's the third factor. So if you're like, yeah, I'm still running, 80, 70, 80, 65, or whatever, when my ACs kick on, all my plants, 5 times a day, 8 times a day are getting blasted with cold air at the leaf surface. So that's another big factor of just use fans to move the air, and use the air conditioning equipment to do their job alone. And the more that the air is moving around, the easier the pieces of equipment can do their job as well.
How low should your leaf surface temperature be for your ambient temperature?
So on the VPD chart, I think it ranges from 1 to 5 degrees. I think that's like, if it's
like 2 to 4 degrees, especially.
2 to 4. Yeah. So like 1 to 5 on the extremes.
Like that differential.
Yeah.
So like for me, that was a big learning experience too, especially when you're doing IPMs and stuff like that, your leaf surface temperature. There's a lot of people who turn their lights on way too quick, and if you're slapping at an intensity and you just sprayed with an oil-based or something like that, you fried or you did something or whatever. So for me, a big shout out to my boy Jason over here too, Max Out Management. He put me on leaf surface temperature a while back, and it was the biggest thing for me that I learned that was almost even paying attention to what my HydroX might say outside of this, what your EPD is. On your TrollMaster, like my leaf surface temperature, I was going in with like a laser gun and just hitting every single pocket of leaves, because too, what a lot of people don't do, when you take your par meter out and you go to every, they just go to the center of the room and they're underneath the light, they're like, oh yeah, this is what my PPFD is. No, dude, you gotta go to one corner, this corner, center and your hottest zone, and then add and divide them by that total amount of number. That's what your actual PPFD is.
100%. As just another reminder before we keep going on the show, if you guys have any questions, add your question on that flashcard. We'll get to them towards the end of the panel here. Who wants to move on to a little breeding? Who's making some seeds? Who's interested in breeding, genetics? We got a little bit here. I want you to take this one here. So let's talk about some best practices to produce stable genetics? Because I think the thought is like anybody could make seeds, right? But you gotta, what are like the points to make seeds with a purpose, and how to have stable genetics so that when you're, as if it was cloned, right, you're passing it on to somebody else, you're passing on the best possible thing. You did the work. So what are some like bullet points in doing the work the right way?
Validation. I mean, any time when you're bringing in a new genetic and you're going to do breeding, you should do pathogen testing. Because if you're going to breed, hoplite is shown to actually transfer to a seed. So yeah, when you're popping seeds, and I forget what the percentage is, but it could be a very high percentage that hoplite can come actually in the seed form. So if you're breeding with a 10 to 20%. So if you're breeding with a genetic that has hoplite in there, then you're already setting yourself off. And like I said, I do treat every genetic as that, and sometimes stuff won't pop for hoplite, but we still kind of think it might have a latent.
Sometimes the latent word is the key, right?
Yes.
Right.
But then once you get past that, and you're looking at the genetic, the agronomic traits of these cultivars that you want to breed with, you're trying to find something that maybe create a new and exciting genetic. I work with Sergio on this stuff too, and we work as cultivation partners where we'll pop seeds for them, right? And we'll run them through. And the first time when you're looking at a genetic from seed, and I don't have the data and the science on this, but popping from seed is going to give you a different genetic expression than a clone from that seed. And even then, another generation from that. 3 generations is really where I start seeing this genetic expression to be, yes, nice and stable. And a lot of times terpene profiles become elevated after the 3rd generation. That I've noticed. And this has gone, we've validated this a bunch of times. So if you're popping something and you see a good genetic expression off the first one, do it a second and do it a 3rd time before you bring it into production, because you might see traits that come out on that 3rd time that you are desirable or undesirable. And herm traits is an undesirable trait, and I won't say every strain that herms is a bad strain, because there actually is some really good strains that we go in and we will mitigate those herms. We will pick them off because the terpene level is so elevated, and it's worth it. It's worth the do. We do a lot of feminized breeding. We have breeding chambers at our facility, so we can't do these mega pheno hunts like my boy Dan from Happy Dream Genetics does, and he gives us his strains too, and they've been all fire, and hats off to that. But we have a small facility where we're doing this, so we find that feminized breeding, really we can get we can narrow down our phenotypes that we're going to see from these genetics, right? So if we have one that we really like and we have another one, we'll reverse it and we'll breed them into each other, and then we start looking at those agronomic traits, and it passes validation. Validation is one thing when your leaf to calic ratio, if it's going to work in a commercial field, you're looking at all this structure. Is it going to work in a 2-tier system? Can I grow it small? These are all questions that you have to answer before you put in production, because once it's in production, that's where your money's at. You have to know.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Making moms out of feminized seeds, is there any caution to take? Do you throw caution to the wind? Because I've had that question myself. I've been asked that question. I just haven't done enough to give a stable answer, and I'm curious myself.
I have not seen it yet. I've read some studies when you're doing S1s or you're doing feminized seed that there might be some immunity issues. There might be some recessive genes that start popping out. I have not seen any studies that verify that yet. I find though my genetic expression is really narrowed down because I can see the female flower off both sides. And a lot of times when you're doing a regular seed, and we do regular seed, we do open pollination on regular seeds too, but to narrow down that genetic expression off a regular seed, looking at a male, you're looking at agronomic traits from this male, you're looking at vigor, you're looking at, stem smell. And some of those things pass on, right? Do the little rubs and the smell it, And some of that passes on, but for us, it's mostly feminized breeding.
So,
and I haven't seen a recession or anything off that feminized breeding that we create our moms. We do moms a little bit different, and it's part of our IPM practices. We stay really, really young. None of our moms are over a month old. And when we take clones, they aren't considered moms for us. They're considered mills. So when we look at them, when we're doing a run of say 300 plants, 100 might be set off to the side to the 100 best are set off to the side, and we look at it as a generational approach, right? We're taking that 100 best, and those first cuts off that are going to be for the next round. First tier is our best cuts. The fastest growing plant is our fastest growing
I
part
assume
of the plant.
the top.
The
right
top.
there, yeah. You leave it on
One.
top, then you take that top,
Yes.
and that's your
Absolutely.
topping and your cloning for the next batch.
Plants are touched. That's our cultural practice. Plants are not touched in veg, defoliation, any ways to spread a pathogen is eliminated. So we take those top cuts, then we move to tier 2 cuts, right? And we're still getting good tier 2 cuts, and then we'll do tier 3 cuts. We try to stay only tier 1, but sometimes, you need a little bit overage. You go tier 2, tier 3, and then off
Tier
those
2 being like the next branch is down?
secondaries. Yep, secondaries. Tier 3 is the secondaries after that. But still off that next round, the best ones are chosen for clones on the next round. Every time, mom stock veg is the most important part of your facility. We don't throw the best ones into bloom, but if you do this generational approach, you'll find that you can clean things up. And we find that we can mitigate a lot of this hop plague, a lot of these diseases and viruses that you see in the plant through this approach.
I love it. So still kind of the same approach as far as like the generations for the fem seeds to really check them on stock to really, go off and let you 1 or 2 generations to this kind of stuff. Awesome. This past one for Sergio, off the breeding and the nursery aspect, because obviously you have your nursery up in Sacramento as well. Let's talk a little bit about the synergy, the relationship, the strategic relationship between breeders, nurseries, and so that nurseries are where they should be to provide stock to other cultivators.
Absolutely, and I want to piggyback on what Chad just touched on just for a brief moment, because before something even goes into the mom stock, it's going through that validation process. I can't emphasize that part enough. And really,
Dissecting microscope, looking at these things.
really is. Hunting with partners like Kush Alley and Maven Genetics is really cool and special. It's a privilege because we ultimately know that you guys are doing what you can. Along the way, I'm gathering all that data. So when it reaches actual, commercial validation status and it gets the good to go, and it's coming to the nursery, we already have that irrigation strategy dialed in. We know the stretch factor. We know the resistance and susceptibilities at that point too. So ultimately, that's why we're making sure that when we make those selections, they're ready for prime time.
And it takes that work because that's work then that everybody is willing or able to do. That's time and money. Like you're not really expecting a gain from really. Like
We gain.
In the long term, right? But I mean, it takes that work to really to pass it on, and then because that validation process takes work to get it done.
It does, and it's expensive to validate. So again, we're grateful for having partners that are willing to put in that hunt, but ultimately they're now leading with the new flavor that we're looking for. And today in California, it's candies with a twist, right? That's what we're looking for. So, and shout out to Good Greens. Good Greens has got some really cool, interesting flavors that are going to be dropping through Cultivated in the next month. So, really excited for that collection coming through. But it's exciting. But when we start looking at the relationship, right? It all starts with synergy and collaboration. We don't want to ultimately, we want to make sure that there's trust and transparency throughout the whole process, which is we're having tools like tissue culture and genomic fingerprinting and pathogen screening. All of this stuff is synergized, right? It's an ecosystem. If we all win, then this is a whole system that gets to be rinsed and repeated along the way. So again, from a breeding perspective, you want to be able to have a nursery partner that can actually get something out to scale, but it starts with pheno hunting, right? That staying close to the whole validation process is super crucial. You got to be able to, I'm probably I'm the antithesis of Captain Sabo. I am willing to cut something out immediately if it doesn't have one strong factor. It's got to pass through every single checkbox, right?
So you got to be willing to kill the plants and move on.
Got to be willing.
You can't be the pack rat and just store it and one day I'll come back to it or whatever. Yeah.
We cannot afford at this very moment. Yes, I'm sure we've passed on plenty of great terpene profiles, but if it doesn't check the box for commercial viability, that's what we're trying to find right now. We just got to make sure everybody can succeed.
So what are some tools, some services that most people should be implementing to help you with the validation process, help you with the fingerprinting, help you with the pathogens, so that you can put your grow behind this and be successful off of those runs?
I feel like we all have a cheat code today because there's so many wonderful labs, there's so many wonderful software and technologies out there. Find something and try it. We're talking about crop steering, we can use a system like Arroyo. or whatever it might be, because I'm ultimately trying to understand that irrigation strategy. So when I release a clone, I can give you that irrigation strategy, whether it's generative or vegetative on the genetic tendency, you're gonna know. So all the stretch factor data, everything that we can deliver, and that was something cool that Arroyo just recently released that I'm getting a chance to play around with, is genetic recipes. So now when somebody buys one of our clones, we can actually deploy that irrigation strategy through Arroyo to whoever wants it. So you can stay within your boundaries.
That's huge, because with the nurseries, it used to be like nurseries didn't have the tissue culture. Now that's a staple. They didn't have testing before. Now that's a staple. That's what's expected from a nursery now. That's the new standard.
Exactly.
So like if that technology is happening now, where the cultivator could buy this strain from the nursery and say, not only here's a piece of paper and how to, what the strain likes, you could go into your software and there's your irrigation strategy. It sounds to me like that will become a new standard in the near future as that scales up.
Well, you're de-risking the whole process, right? We can't afford to do an R&D run if we're planting at scale. Like we can't do that. So we need to make sure that you're working with trusted breeders that have good genetics, so you're not wasting a lot of phenotypic space, right? I mean, that's part of the process too, is just making sure you're working with legitimate breeders that are working with clean material. And going back to the hop slate and viroid, I think that you should really test your plants. If you're going to go into a pollination project, make sure your parents are tested clean. And I'm not just talking about hop slate now. You need to do a whole viral panel, virus and viroid panel, right? Like it's irresponsible if you go into something like that without having any full panel testing. But when you start going into other additional tools, like you just talk about irrigation and crop steering strategies, what about a lighting strategy, right? I want to be able to talk about this amount of blue spectrum to that much red spectrum at certain parts of that cycle that follow along the generative, the bulking, and the generative ripening stage of that crop steering recipe too.
So for everybody out there that buys clones, who would want that kind of information along with your stock? Johnny over here, yeah. So
that's exactly why the validation process, because everything is strain dependent. I mean, that's it. If you're going to go through the process, you got to do it and be very diligent about what your standardization practices look like. So again, there's certain genetics that you want to run for hash production. That may not make it to the to the smokable flower bag of peel packs that you're trying to grow. You want to bulk those up because you're really just trying to grow mass at that point.
So for each of you, if you had to give the audience, the crowd, the people on the live over here, and the people going to watch this in the future, one big takeaway, one big piece of value that you could give them that is just going to be undeniable, tangible value in their gardens.
Use your network, right? Use Quest, use Foge, use Athena, use Drip, use GH, use Gavita. These guys are going to tell you how to succeed. Arvum, MyFlora, they're going to tell you how to succeed. We didn't have this back in the day. We did not have this shit. We went on forums. We borrowed from Big Ag. We didn't have all this information. The cultivators now are really lucky and unlucky because price per pack is, you can't fail anymore. We could put out booth back in the day and still make a huge living off of it, right?
I think you're a good grower because
you can fucking sell an OG that looked like shit and make $6,400 a pound back in the day. There's no room for error anymore. These guys are here to want you to succeed, right? And that's the thing I tell everybody in the cultivation: call up the manufacturer, pick their brain, and take it with a grain of salt because every condition, every situation is different. But they're going to try to help you succeed. They're going to put resources to you to succeed. So don't shy away from that. There's no secret sauce here, guys. There may be a secret sauce where your practice is a little bit different than everything else, but they want you to succeed. So that's my big takeaway.
I love it. And really use that because we have a lot of great booths, a lot of great companies here. So after this panel, please hit every single booth and gather as much as you can, because you're right. Nowadays, the model is give, and I send you the equipment or the light or the service or what have you. But there's so much information and knowledge that comes along with it nowadays. That's just, it's like, how do you ignore it? How do you ignore it?
You'd be a fool.
Yeah, you'd be a fool.
Fail.
You'd be a fool.
Sonny knows and you know and Sergio knows, we failed more times than we succeed back in the day.
Yep,
and it was because we had to figure stuff out. So now we have all these resources. Use them.
Santo, what's one big takeaway?
No, agreed. Utilizing us as a resource is key. Look, you guys put food on our table. We want to keep food on your table, right? And I think outside of utilizing your teams, whether it's Athena, us, foes, whomever you work with, your breeders, the other piece is the data collection piece that Sergio brought up through Roya. There are so many times that I work with customers, and for us to develop a solid dehumidification plan, everything's synergistic, right? Things have to fall into play. And if you have data collection and you know what a specific strain likes irrigation-wise, fertigation-wise, lights-wise, so on and so forth, then you can help us develop that dehumidification plan for you. That helps us. The more data, for us, it's about data collection, right? To properly not only just size the right capacity in your garden, but to stage it as well, right? So a lot of times we look at, hey, the information that your peak values going into flower or going into a nursery, or whatever the case may be, your coldest, your design conditions, and so on and so forth. And then we look at things like how to break up the dehumidification into the smallest increments so that you can properly stage your equipment. All of this is possible with data collection. And I think the more we dive deeper into that, the better we are going to get at outfitting rooms, designing rooms. And the same thing, again, goes on the genetic front, right? A lot of us have ran the strains that are, that love to eat. And some of us, some of the strains out there are sippers. And so to know that upfront ahead of time, right, in your garden, I think is a godsend to understand this.
I love it, I love it. If you want to learn more about that, head on over to that Quest booth after this. So Sonny, what's a big takeaway you could hand to this crowd so they could walk away with some tangible value utilizing their garden?
I guess the biggest takeaway for me in the garden, all my years of cultivation, working with Drip, Power SI, again, all the different brands and farms that I worked for, is don't be afraid to go do something new. As far as try new products, use new things, whatever. I'm talking almost every mainstream hydro line on a hydro shelf. No joke. And for me, the biggest takeaway, working for a company, let's say Drip or Power SI, dude, you guys don't have to run us, and we don't have to be this big, thing. We can still be cool, and you can not run my nutrients. I always tell people all the time, and another biggest takeaway for me is you want to be able to know your consumer, because there's so many people who are just run this, keep it this, run it that way, and it's just going to work for you. But for me, dude, I've done things like that, and it didn't work the same. Your lighting setup, your media, your room square footage, everything is different in every single grow. Don't think everything that is the same. And another big takeaway I could say is just keep your grows clean. Don't, keep your grows clean.
Don't be lazy. We all see that pile of dirt in the corner. We all saw that leaf we walked by 3 times today. Just pick it up. Just pick it up. Sweep it, mop it, clean it, pick it up.
That part. And another thing, back to the try new things, Rex, I was trying Power SI Original before, he had put Bloom on a burgundy bottle, and he sent me a bunch of bottles with the instructions how to use them, and I never watched a product change my plants overnight at the snap of my finger. And that's why, for me, I started putting other people on his silica and the versions he was running of it, and boom, it exploded to later. Now I'm a facility advisor for one of his companies. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to go out and try and do certain things to change the game up, because there's so many people who are going to tell you, yo, just do this, or run this a certain way, or hey, try this bottle, I tried it for my honey, or whatever. Go with your gut instinct. If you're not satisfied with your product, try something new. One of my favorite quotes ever is by Albert Einstein. Doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting different results is a definition of insanity.
I love it too. Try something new. And on that note, to piggyback, that's kind of where, I had my journey with the SOPs as well. It was tough to have other people consider to try something new, but it's a certain mindset, I believe. If you have a certain mentality of continuous learning, curiosity, and the desire to try something new and see if the plants, have that change. Who out here runs the Clone Coach SOPs? Anybody? We got Johnny over here. So it's taking that change and try something new, and then let the plants do the talking.
Again, I want to add to what he was saying, trying something new. That is something that I think excites every cultivator, the R&D process of trying a new product. and actually it gets you to question things, gets you to question these old bro science beliefs. You know, like we do things because we were told to do these things. We do these things because people say they are good. Validate that, right? Do
Find out for yourself.
If it doesn't work, try the new techniques. We constantly do R&D all the time. You know, it is even with GH and I work closely with General Hydro. I talk to the agronomists one-on-one with them to modify a recipe. They came out with a late bloom on that modification, you know. So these are things like we're all learning. This industry is brand new professionally. Information is coming in daily. Research facilities are studying this plant deep down, right? We're learning things, and everybody here has a really good opportunity to be the best grower, way better than we were before, because now they're studying it deep down.
Sergio?
For me, it's pretty simple. Have gratitude for the gift of work with this beautiful plant. If you're not happy doing what the fuck you're doing, you need to get out of this industry.
I love it. I mean, I feel so blessed. I've never really used blessed in my life. Never really used that word. But the fact that I'm able to shape a career, shape my path around this plant, which is really the one, very few things in my life that I have a passion for, is amazing. It's truly a blessed thing to be able to shape your whole life around this plant, and it's on a positive note. It helps others, it brings people together like this, expands knowledge, builds businesses, builds brands around this plant.
You know, Clone Coach, recently I had to have a sit down with a couple, because there's a lot of drama in the cultivation. They should have a series over this. We have a lot of fights. It always happens. It's trying to get that team to work together. That's the most important. It's never just one person. It's the whole team. You're not going to grow good cannabis unless you have a whole team. And there's toxic people in there. And, you know, so I had to sit down with two of our employees, and one of the guys said, we're just growing cannabis. And that offends me, because this is my career. This is my profession. You know, and I said on another
thing, we've given up, the things we've risked, looking over our shoulders, all of that risk, man.
This is hard. It's hard to grow professionally cannabis. It takes a high level, a high skill set, and we can make more money doing something else. Like, there's no question.
Any other normal business, really, with no regulation, no overtaxation, no issue with states and the feds. It looks like nice and shiny, but then the passion for the plant really holds us on this side. I love it. Who out there is ready for some Q&A? Get into these questions. We're ready for some Q&A? All right. We're gonna get into these here. There's a first one here. This is an easy one. I think I'll take this one. What do you see for clones? Freshly cut or fully rooted? Find a sweet spot for your veg and your crops. It depends on your environment, your feed, and everything else, but there's a sweet spot. I always think there's a sweet spot. With any nutrient brand you use, there's a sweet spot. And it usually ends up being in the mid-2s, 2.2, 2.5. If you have LEDs, have yet to see solid green plants at 2.2 or 2.5 on LED. It's just tricky. It's just that LED just depends a little bit more. But what do you see to use for the clones? My personal preference is to keep it the same. Keep it the same. If you have a sweet spot in your veg plants, it's giving you solid green growth, no deficiencies, no toxicities, none of that. Why should your clone get any different? Their clone was that plant that you're looking at that had this nice praying solid green leaves. So for me, I keep it the same. Call it 2.5, and you're gonna be fine. Great question. Who liked that question? That was an easy one. That was a good one. Next one here. Had one of 8 trays completely full and died, all same water, pH, EC, same soak. Any reason for this? Never happened before. Yeah, well, one sec. For me, like if there's an anomaly, how do you say anomaly? No. It's usually something like environment, like Sonny's saying, like AC is hitting it, the equipment's hitting it, the fan's hitting it. The dome is not seated on the tray properly. There's something visual that's different. Usually, that's why I do like the visual checklist. So if you want the visual checklist, go to clonecoach.com. It's free. Because you should be able to walk up to your domes and trays and see if things are right or wrong on certain days. And if one of those trays is different, you got to factor that in. You can rotate it. You can see what factors that's causing it.
Take a look at your clone care process. Did you overwater that tray? lot of times it just comes back to overwatering, and then it's just stems from there.
Yeah, another thing too could be like you might have maybe put it under another thing of clone trays and you didn't realize your intensity was blasting on those things and you popped your tops on your domes too quick and your environment just went out of whack. I'll never forget this one time. We had a whole rack of clone lights plugged into a different outlet and they all just went bop and went super intense one time in a nursery, and I literally watched the entire row of clone trays die and I was just like, how did that just happen? And then you go and you check, with a par meter with the light intensity, and it's double what it is over here on the left-hand side, and you're doing the same SOPs, cracking domes same day, you know what I mean? They're all from the same round of cuts, but that could have happened. Could have been a straight, something out of your control you didn't even know. One outlet socket.
No doubt. And go back to testing that mom, right? We make sure that we're batching every single tray back to the mom, so go test that mom and see what's cracking.
Great point. Who liked that question? Have you guys got it, has that ever happened to anybody before where you get like one random tray where you're like, what the hell? You back there, Sonny? Has that happened to you? So now you got a little insight. Look at your room, look at your equipment, trace it back to your mom, and and catch it early. Don't just let the whole 14 days go by and be like, oh, what happened? Daily checks go a long way. Next question here. I think it's kind of half the rip. If you don't see, do you spray? Yes. If you don't see whatever it is, do you spray? Absolutely. Preventative. You always want to be on a preventative end of it versus a reactive end, and trying to go, work backwards. Get ahead of it. Next question here. What is the most effective fertilizer for rooting clones? Quote unquote, or in parentheses, different strains.
I mean, at the end of the day, dude, you can get clones to root on any nutrient line. I've had guys do it in water and aloe vera at the end of the day. So, I mean, for me, obviously, again, I work for a company called Driven Power. So if you guys ever want to see crazy roots, try running a little bit of monosilicic acid in your rooting trays. That's one thing I'll definitely say right now. I've seen some of the longest, fuzziest roots in my life. If you guys ever want to try it, holler at me. I'll make sure you guys can try a bottle for your clones.
Yeah, no, I mean, fertilizer is, fertilizer. If you want the most effective thing to get your clones to root, that's a hormone. That's a root hormone. So it's not categorized as a fertilizer, but
I was going to follow up on that. Every fertilizer company you see in here, you're going to get great results.
100%.
So
100%.
it really shouldn't be the fertilizer that's causing your clones not to root.
To not root, 100%. If your clones aren't rooting, usually environment or procedures. Usually, you didn't burp. It's too cold, too damp, too wet. Think of it, it's propagation. We need warmth, we need some humidity, but we need the clones to breathe. If the clones aren't breathing in stagnant cold air, you're not going to get roots in a timely fashion. Next question here. How often do you foliar clones?
We actually have we got a pretty straightforward procedure. We're going to hit it with micronized sulfur. 8 to 10 grams per gallon as a preventative, so probably around that day 8 to 9 time frame.
Yeah, me usually I don't tend to foliar during the rooting process. If this is considered clones, I'm thinking the rooting process. I like to do all of my foliars prior on the moms. The only thing I'm spraying on my clones during the rooting process is not for nutrient supplementation. It's for pathogen prevention. Because the biggest concern at that point is the extra humidity and that environment you're creating and the risk you have to create, that. So for me, it's pathogen prevention during the clones.
Follow up on we don't foliar on our clones. And it is we do not foliar, and it is only for IPM. It is only for pathogen is only for pathogen prevention. There's no need to spray to green the plant up in a clone form.
Right, yeah, some people are like, how do I green up my clone, with this foliar spray? I'm like, it should have started green and it should stay green. If it's not, get the Clone Coach SOPs and I guarantee you they'll start green and stay green. Next question here. That was kind of the same, looks like the same handwriting. What's the best foliar protocol for clones? I think we covered that. Y'all agree? Yeah, all right. What makes Root 8 different or better than other rooting formulas? It's heavily concentrated, and it's a formula that I'm tweaking, right? And it's my path to try to create my own product as well. But IBA is IBA. Period. It's just concentration levels. For me, what makes it better is the fact that it's concentrated and the price point, the price per gram of IBA. Because if you look at, say, a gallon of rooting gel at 0.3%, you're gonna have roughly 12 grams of IBA in that gallon. But you're paying $350, $400 for that. Root Aid, you get 10 grams of IBA for $60. Add that to distilled water, use it as a quick dip like you would dip and grow. You got the application of rooting hormone for a fraction of the price.
You know, I wanted to ask you this question because we've used all kinds of rooting gels, Olivia's, you know, the gels back in the day. And I moved away from gels because I thought of pathogen spreading. So when you're dipping it in a liquid, do you have any concern of a pathogen spreading versus a powder?
Well, you know, yeah, someone said ketchup bottle. That was the original solution to that problem or question, was the cross-contamination in the same shot glass of gel. And that's why I came up with that ketchup bottle tech. Where you do put that gel into a squeeze bottle and you squeeze into every hole, there's no cross-contamination anymore. Now, are you concerned about the cross-contamination with Root Aid? It's in theory, yeah, you're looking at, yeah, you're sharing the same cup, but the fact that Root Aid is so cheap, you can still isolate it per mom, just like you do your scissors, just like you do your tray. You know, a little shot glass, and it's a fraction of the price to isolate it that way.
100%. It's all mother specific. You have a propagation kit for every single mother. You're going to eliminate everything.
Yeah, you're going to isolate it at least. When something pops up, you know where to find it and you know where to kill it. This one says to PK or not. Like use a PK, I think. Who asked that question? Like if you need PK to root, it's kind of heard that kind of mentality. But look, a base nutrient, a vegetative nutrient has PK in it. All right, guys, you don't need to switch or change or add. Trust me, there's PK in your veg formula already. So I don't think you need to add it. That's all it says. So I don't know. Yeah.
Like supplement more PK is what I think the question's kind of asking, because like guys, old school tech, guys would add like a sugar, or guys would add like something into their moms to get their moms to turn more green or whatever. But for me, I think if you have a well-balanced ratio, and it depends on what you started the plant at and what you really kept it at, and then again, always kind of keeping the same mother stock as it's coming down on that same regimen. I don't really think you need to add more PK, take away this, add more of this. If you're already off balance from the rip on your mom, then yeah, don't expect to add more PK and off of a sick mom and expect your clones to it. Just doesn't make sense.
It all comes back to environment. Keep your 0.9 to 1.1 BPD in check. Your plants will be healthy.
I love it. 0.9, 1.0. That's where I like to play. Let's see here. Next question. How to properly acclimate clone trays after rooting. I got 2 cents on this. For me, I'm acclimating the entire 14 days that I'm rooting. I'm not waiting until after the 14 days to start acclimating to my room. And that's the reason why I suggest, if people have a separate clone room and are struggling with success rate, rooting times, things like that, I suggest them always bring that rack into your vegetative room where you have that stock you cut from. The dome is adding that extra humidity for the rooting process, but you're slowly acclimating it right back to the environment that it came from. And when you're doing that, you really shouldn't have no issue.
You should absolutely have a venting progression schedule, right? So as the days progress, you start opening up that vent, and then by a certain point, based on your environment, you should take that dome completely off, and then you start the real rooting process once that dome's off.
Yeah, for me, I burp daily, keep the vents open. That's how I'm acclimating throughout the 14 days.
We do the same thing. We take the dome off, we watch the leaf position. If you see it drooping, put that dome back on. So it's slowly acclimating the plant to the environment it's going to be in. And that's something that, Danny and Nathan, that they do in the clone room. They constantly are taking domes off, washing the inside of the domes, and putting them back on, and slowly acclimating this plant to be able to take the dome completely off.
Yeah, and then again, I have guys who even do domeless, like straight, no domes, like at all, and acclimate their plants. It's just, again, it's, you're running a VPD slightly a little bit higher, the plant's kind of responding, and they have great rooting results, believe it or not, like over a 95% success rate, and they do not put a dome on one of their rooting trays space. So I mean, it just goes back to what you're saying, you know, your environment and keeping that more on point with those things. But then say you're in commercial cultivation, you're doing indoor, most of us are still putting domes on the clones. Like getting that plant acclimated right, like quicker than you should, like popping those vents on your dome, you know, a couple of days after, and then hardening them off longer, keeping those domes off for a longer period of process. And then, like for me, I always learned, you know, it's like 5 minutes the first time, then it's like 10 minutes, then you keep extending those periods of times, and you'll notice that whatever isn't strong is gonna die, and whatever is right there, they're gonna rock, and they will clutch.
I love leaving that dome off until it's wilty, right? It's not gonna go because you're getting oxygen in that root zone, the roots are stretching.
So we got like 5 minutes, so we're gonna do rapid fire on these last sets of questions here, all right? Next question. Who's liking the questions so far? Let me hear some notes. Have you guys liking the questions? Yeah. Next question here. Have any of you heard of any new viroids that are worth testing for when bringing in new clones? Rapid fire questions. Heard of any new viroids?
I'm just going to start with, you should be keeping the same sanitation and sterilization protocols so that way you're protected against anything that does come up. Clean behaviors, cultural practices, keep it standardized.
I think it's my floor that does it. Is that correct? Yeah, so they have a full pathogen testing of a lot of viroids that we have not heard of. So there is a ton out there. It's not just hop label. There's a lot of these that are...
There's one that I want to call out. It's Pseudomonas. It acts like hopsite viroid, but it's undetectable under a hopsite viroid assay. However, again, it behaves similarly to that. Now, there's not enough research out there, but I just know that it's starting to come up a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, it's very clear. So to answer the question, any new viroids to test for, go to your favorite testing lab. They're going to have multiple tests available for you, probably for some stuff you haven't heard of. Take your pick. Next question here. Most common nutrient deficiencies in clones.
Always comes back to environment. Just make sure your environment's in there, because ultimately your plant health is going to come back to your environment.
Yeah, and I think for nutrient deficiencies, I think if you're feeding your mom 2.5, 2.8, 3.0, and then you soak at 0.5 or 1.0, and that's all you fed them, that's a deficiency you created yourself. So, you know, like it's more like the personal, input causing the deficiencies in clones. Next question here. Best IPM strategies for mother/flower rooms. Rapid fire. Prevent, rotate sprays.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on them, guys. It is a preventative, and you have to work with your local Department of Agriculture. I know in LA, they're pretty tough. We cannot use micronized sulfur because it's a fungicide. But there's other micronized sulfur products out there, I'm not gonna name names, that are actually foliar feeds, nutrient feeds. Yeah. Find those, use them. But yes, it comes to preventative. We use biologicals. We also use predatory bugs as well.
Yeah, I think to quickly add on that, best IPM strategy is a healthy plant. So if you're supplementing with sulfur, that's giving nutrients to the plant. A healthy plant in the right environment has its own internal defense system. So a healthy plant's going to be probably your best strategy.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. I think the environmental aspect is also something you said it, right? I mean, balancing your environment, having the right temperature, having the right humidity, allowing the plants to transpire properly, allowing the cultural practice, and allowing the nutrients to come up the plant to make a healthy plant, right? You don't get that without the proper environment.
Right, nice and steady. Next question here. What strains are the fastest rooting?
I mean, right now, just from the candies perspective, a lot of the gelato crosses and lineages are pretty fast rooting. What doesn't root very well are the Z-terps and OGs.
OGs and Zs don't root fast, but I think things that do root fast are usually, for me, like older genetics, steady, stable and steady genetics. A healthy plant, no matter what genetic, is going to give you your best shot and fastest rooting. And most things you get at the 14-day mark, some OGs, things like that, are going to take you to 16, 18, maybe 20,
And this also comes back to your mother stock rotation, right? You should be having a quarterly mother stock replenishment program. We track how many cuts, and depending on the specific lineage, like OGs and cookies, they have a much lower lifespan. We average anywhere between 500 to 700 cuts per mother plant in that 3 to 4 month period. So we've been able to track when that viral load actually starts to come out. Again, like tissue culture, meristem tissue culture is different than normal tissue culture. So you have to understand what you're working with at that same time.
I love it, I love it. We got a few more questions here, guys. I love it. Best media for clones, teens, and mothers. The word best is I don't know if it's the right word. It's subjective, 100%. Yeah.
Maybe air. You know, like the studies show that maybe aeroponics is your best for cloning. Now, commercially, we don't use that. We don't use that. I use Stonewall. I use Rockwell. I know. I just recently saw a new product that Hawthorne's putting out, and they showed. And I think you tested the cocoa peat plugs.
I think it's on its way to me.
So, you know, I think we're constantly looking for the best product, yeah. But it's whatever works in your system the best. And I don't like to change medias. I don't like to use one media and then plug it into a different media. I like to stay consistent with the same media.
Yeah, for me, like what's best for me is keep it as similar as possible for every stage of growth. Why would you have a mom and Rockwool, a clone and Root Riot, and then your teens and Cocoa? Why the hell are you doing it? Just keep it, whatever your media is, keep it as consistent throughout. It's going to help you with your feeds, your pH, your environment, your dry backs, your watering, your irrigation strategy. So for the best, keep it the same. Keep it uniform. Next question here. What happened to OG strain? We need an OG. Yeah, I love it, the smoke though. But yeah.
I mean, the consumer's dictating our market. It's not what us cultivators want.
Stop buying the candies and you'll
I
get
would
more
smoke
OG.
all day long, but the consumers are dictating what we grow. We're getting customer feedback.
Love it. We got a few more questions here, guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate your patience here. We're gonna get tacos after this and stuff, all right, guys? So, a few more questions. Biggest issues commercial growers / nurseries are facing right now? Cash flow. Just banking. That's normal. Yeah, banking, financing.
I would say, like, especially another big problem in Los Angeles, especially, is like power upgrades, other things like that. I was working at a facility that was the number 9th license in downtown Los Angeles, and it took that guy 3.5 years to just get one extra panel. So I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's subjective to obviously where you live, what kind of power company you deal with, and other things like that. But I would say that's a big one: financing, banking. And I just think that, again, too, like, there's just not enough people in this space that are working more together. I see just a lot of people try to work against each other. And I feel like if more brands kind of came along with what we're doing all here, rather than kind of dividing it and just coming together, we'll all be able to last through this. But I don't really see it, happening with how many people just try to come in and just take a giant money grab at the game.
I joke about cash flow, but really it's a planning process too. Like, utilize these networks, utilize these experts. When you're planning and building out your nursery and your grow, these guys know a lot. They're experts in their field. I'm not an expert at anything, man, but I'll find somebody that knows more than me, and I'll utilize them.
One of the things I see on the equipment side of things, especially visiting cultivators in older markets like Colorado and Washington, is budgeting for future equipment. I mean, going again with plant cash flow. The industry being where it's at, there are a lot of issues with cultivators being able to afford equipment. So from that side, I mean, obviously, budgeting is incredibly important for future equipment needs.
To follow up on that, grow within your means. Don't try to produce too much flower. We're growing indoors, it's expensive. So you have to produce craft cannabis indoors. If you're growing mids, you're not gonna be able to sell them, guys. Like, you have to produce the best quality flower. And I see a lot of people just expanding, and not putting the infrastructure in there, right? Not putting enough dehumidifiers, not putting enough AC. So if you don't have that power, dude, don't build out those blue rooms. Stay within your means.
Right. This next question, you can take this one, Santo. How many pints of dehume do you recommend per light, HPS and LED? How many pints of dehumidification do you recommend per light?
Yeah, we don't work per light. Again, going on the information and data side of things, right? If you know what you're putting into your room from the established irrigation plan, and Sergio again once was touching upon it, understanding what that strain is. If you're going to monocrop a room, or if you're going to run several different strains in the room, and you understand that those strains are all relatively irrigated, fertigated at the same rates, that's how you're going to size your humidification solution. Whether it's a mom room, a juvenile room, teen room, veg room, your flower room. I mean, it's a little more intense when it comes to flower rooms because there are more transitional phases. But when you're talking about sizing, it literally is understanding your irrigation strategy, or your irrigation volume, your peak, essentially your peak and your minimum loads. Because the peak loads are essential for sizing the maximum plan. The min loads are essential for incremental plans. So how do I divide this plan up? And so if you're in a situation, let's say if you have a massive nursery, you've got tons of mother plants in there, juvenile plants in there. At any given, let's say at the peak time, you put 200 gallons in there, and you want to be able to have a humidification solution, which includes your HVAC system that can cover that 200 gallons per day. Now, when I talk about these min loads, yeah, sure, there's going to be a situation where you may not have full capacity juvenile plants in with your mother plants, or maybe not full capacity mother plants, whatever the case may be. You want to be able to establish incrementally. So how do I break up this humidification plan? The recommendation is never to stick one gigantic humidifier in there, because you're going to see huge swings throughout the process. So what you want to do is you want to break that up. What does that look like? Does that look like 4, 50-gallon humidifiers? Does that look like 6 30-gallon humidifiers? It really depends. And so when you guys bring information to us, again, it's a very information-rich, intense process to size your facilities for humidification. We tend to say, we oversimplify it and say, hey, you know your irrigation plan. It's a lot more complicated than that. You know your irrigation peaks, your peaks and your valleys, right? Your mins, your max, your design conditions, because the design conditions essentially affect the performance and the efficiency of the dehumidifiers. Understanding your design conditions, your irrigation loads, and everything in between is going to help me size your grow. Now, if you come to me and you don't have that information, there's a saying we have amongst us in the dehumidification world: garbage in is garbage out. So if you don't understand what you're putting into that facility, please don't expect to have a right fits, because we do want to have success, right? Your success is my success, and my success is your success.
And if you want to learn more.
So I just wanted to follow up on what he's saying. Also know your runoff values you're feeding your plants, right? Because you're not going to get the massive humidity spikes from the water running through the plant. The plants are transpiring. So knowing your plant count, knowing how much you feed them each shot, and also knowing, precision irrigation is really where we're at. Also have the sensor from Arroyo, and understanding that, and understanding how much water is coming out the bottom of the plant.
Excellent point. So understanding your runoff targets, right? If you're putting 100% water in, now what's your runoff? Are you going from 5% all the way up to 25%? That's where you should also be calculating your load, or how much humidification process you need, or 6 pints per plant per day. You're running through that whole vegetative bulking phase. 6 pints per plant per day helps me understand, like, I've got enough runway in case I have a super vegetatively genetic tendency type of a genetic. So,
love it. Great question there. We got 2 more questions left. This next question: what is a strain / cultivar that gave you the most confidence in your craft? I'll just answer for myself. The first strain that I really started off with, which was Wonder Woman, it was a Skunk 1 crossed with, what was it crossed with? Another old school genetic. And that was a rooter like crazy. It gave me the confidence to really keep going and end up where I am today.
I'm gonna be honest, mine was, even though she was stupid finicky, was OG. Like, my first OG cut I ever got, that changed my life, to be very honest, 100% honest. She's super got great weight again. That's all I gotta say. OG will always be queen in my eyes.
What about you guys? What strain?
It's not one strain, but OG is probably the toughest to grow correct, right? Like, let's cut. Like, that is one that changed my perspective on cannabis, because I just love it. But it's putting it on the table with other cultivators. Getting that appreciation from other craft growers that you're seeing that your flower can stack up. So it's not just one strain for me, it's every strain. And if we grow the same strain, we're gonna get different expressions. And like, what makes you feel good about that expression, right? So it is something, looking at other brands out there, looking at a cultivators out there, and knowing that what you're doing is top of the crowd.
Sergio?
One strain, one cultivar. Glitter Bomb. Glitter Bomb was one of those cultivars that you can get super small popcorn nugs, where you can actually bulk with the candy strategy by starting your vegetative bulk day at day 16 or 14 even. So that was the one.
We're down to one last question, y'all. I appreciate all the support, all the patience and everything. We're down to one more question here. What's your opinion on domeless clone tech? Real quick for me,
it all depends on
domeless or not, you still need the right parameters for the rooting process. So without the dome, you still need to increase humidity in that environment around that clone. But what are your guys' opinion, real quick, for this last one, domeless tech?
I think, look, it comes down to environment. You can have a clone room set up where you don't need a dome, right? But you're still going to need to harden it off. You're still going to need to take a lower humidity on that plant and harden it off. So you can't just root it in that same environment the whole time.
That's what I was gonna say too. You started off super high humidity, almost, my guy who does domeless tech, he's at, 83, 85 degrees, 85%, almost 90% humidity, and then as the new sets kind of come in, he drops his humidity as, those weeks come in. There's 3 separate rooms as he does a domeless clone tech, you know what I mean?
The last thing I want to add on that is you can't do multiple batches of clones in the same environment with domeless tech, because the beginning of the rooting process requires different parameters versus the end. And we want to be acclimating, we want to be hardening off, we want to get them accustomed to that environment that we're going into veg with. So it's hard to do multiple batches with domeless tech. That's why I like the dome, because if you're in the same room, multiple batches, weekly cuts, things like that, that's my thoughts. Well, sweet guys, look, thank you. Thank you for coming through. That was the panel here. Thank you all to all the panelists that came through.
Shout out to Paul for getting this all together here, you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Fun coach.
The night's not over, guys, all right? We got a few things. We got tacos being served downstairs outside from 6 to 8. You ran a little bit late here, but there's tacos waiting for you guys down there. 9 p.m. on this stage, we're gonna do a giveaway from a bunch of the brands in the booths, all right? So your raffle tickets, be sure to bring those at 9 p.m. here on stage, all right? We're gonna do that. And last, I just really wanna say thank you. I was kind of making notes here and I was thinking of what to say, but I think it sums it up to just take action. Whether it's introducing yourself to someone you see here tonight, whether it's walking up to that booth, whether it's asking that question, whatever it is, take action, because taking action is what brought us here together tonight. So, just take action, guys, take action.
This is what is fulfilling for me, is to talk to you guys, to come out here. We grew in the shadows, guys. Like, I'm able to actually talk about cannabis at a professional level. It's fulfilling, so being this network and having amazing cultivators around you, this is it's something special.
This is the first, and everybody here is doing their part to shape the future events. So I appreciate every one of you. You guys, I'm gonna do comment cards for the end of the night. So leave me your comments, leave me your thoughts, how you want to shape up these next future events, all right? So before you go downstairs, let me know, leave a little comment card, and trust me, your thoughts will be factored into all the future events. So thank you guys, let's keep the rest of the night going. Clone Plugg Expo.